Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Hello. Are you guys ready for your big Tuesday? Man, what a difference a day makes. The news cycle yesterday exploded after the show, including this great article in the ADN. Sean McGuire, all of a sudden, he took the red pill, apparently, and wrote this whole article about the deficit and how the money's not there. And all you'd think maybe he listened to Brad's show last week, became semi-suicidal, and decided to write a story or something about it. I mean, it was amazing. And you know what's even more amazing is the response from some of the this is my favorite quote of the day so far. This is from the Friday. This is from the Friday, not the ledge finance meeting and everything else that was going on. And all of a sudden, Kodiak Republican Senator Gary Stevens said Tuesday that the deficit projections are really eye-opening. Like he didn't know about this. Like this is my God, I've never seen this before. I've never seen this. This is all news to me. I had no idea. Where did that come from? Oh my God. Anyway, all right. I'm sorry. I just had to jump in with that first things first this morning because wow. Oh, just like, wow, I didn't see that there. Where did that 5 million pound elephant come that's sitting in my easy chair? I had no idea that was in the room with me. All right. Anyway, we're going to continue on here. It's Tuesday. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is joined. I mean, every time I hear this, Gary Stevens like, wow, I didn't see that.
Welcome to the party, pal.
I mean, where have you been? Were you asleep? Did you miss anything? Gary, hello. All right. Anyway, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budget, comes in with a weekly top three. We're going to talk a little bit about what he says in hour two. I'll recap with some of my thoughts, which will be wow. And then at the end of hour two, we're going to be hooked up with Chris Story because we're going to need to calm down. It's like serotonin for the soul, or melatonin or serotonin. I don't know. One of the tonins. It'll be good. All right. Let's without further ado, let's get into it and jump together and get with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Shocking, Brad. Shocking. Who knew that it was deficit spending? And I mean, I am shocked, I tell you, that this is going on this morning.
Yeah, Gary may have spent too much time in the lower 48 setting up his retirement home to
Hawaii. I mean, he's off in paradise, right? I mean, he's like, below Hawaii. He's over there doing whatever. I mean, like, somehow this was a big surprise to everybody.
Yeah. Even I'm depressed about today's show, though. I mean, even I'm depressed about the big three coming today because it's bad, Michael. It's really bad.
I know. It's we keep joking about how Tuesdays is kind of dauber down, but I mean, all we can do is point this out and keep pointing it out, and then all of a sudden, Gary's like, "Wow, I didn't even know." All right, so let's get started. The weekly top three starts with the literally $1 billion. You get $1 billion and you get $1 billion. $1 billion appropriation bill. That's what HB 69 could end up being. Brad, please don't get too suicidal in the middle of the show. All right, we can't deal with that. Just go ahead and but get started on this bill.
So the fiscal note on HB 69 finally came out over the weekend. Thanks to Rob Myers for pointing it out to me when it came out. And so I started through the fiscal note, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. I had done some calculations last week based on the news stories of what an estimate of HB 69 over the long haul would be. And I got the first year right, $330 million. But the subsequent years, I didn't get right at all. So the fiscal note setup, if you've got that first page I sent you, you can throw it up or not. I can talk through it. But the fiscal note shows the appropriation for FY26, the first year of the bill. Nope, it's the other page. The first year of the bill. And then it shows the increments on top of that for the subsequent years of the bill. So the first year of the bill is FY26, the addition in FY26 is $325 million. The increment on top of that, this is where I started going wrong. The increment on top of that. Yeah. So for those able to see this, look at the total operating line, which is about a little bit above halfway through the page, or fund source. That gives you the same number. And you can see the increment on top of the $325 million for FY27 is $173.9 million, $174 million. The increment on top of that, on top of the addition of the 325 and the 173, the increment on top of that for FY28 is 144. Those are the step additions that are in the bill. A big bump in 26, and then another bump in 27, then another bump in 28. And then it goes to inflation, adjusted by inflation. But you can see these inflation adjustments on top of the bill, on top of the cumulative amount at that point, is 51 million in 29, 55 million in 30, 56 million in 31. I've added those up as you've gone. And so the total cost of the bill in FY26 is $326 million. The total cost in FY27 is $500 million, $500 million. The total cost in FY28 is $644 million. The total cost in FY30 is $751 million. The total cost in FY31 is $800 million. And then that's where the fiscal note cuts off. But I took the rate at which it is increasing along the way and added those increments in. And the total, when you do that, the total in FY32 is $865 million. The total in FY33 is $923 million. The total in FY34 is $981 million. And the total in FY35, 10 years from now, 10 years out, if this bill is passed as proposed with these inflation increments going on, the total in FY35 is just from this bill alone. This isn't the total education funding. This is just from this bill alone, is $1,038 million in FY35. When you factor those into to the percent of the POMV, I did a calculation in last Friday's landmine for anybody who wants to go read it. What is happening to the percent of POMV, the percent of the POMV draw that is needed to support state spending, now that we recognize that we've gone past, that we're blowing past 2575. When you factor those in, FY25 is at 76.5%. When you add in SB 69 to the already existing budget, the ledge finance baseline, when you add in SB 69, we go to 98% of the POMV is required to balance government spending. And then in FY27, we go over 100, and we stay over 100 through FY35. We get up to something like 135% or 140% by FY35. I'll have those numbers in the detailed numbers in the coming Alaska landmine column this coming Friday. But we have now, in 2 years, we're going to, if we pass SB 69 as proposed, we're going to blow through the 100% POMV mark. And we're going to blow into, the twilight zone. because we will have no revenues to support the legislation that we're gonna pass this year. All these debates that people are having right now are sort of humorous from the standpoint of, oh, we got 200 million, we got a $200 million deficit this year, and this would add 300, and that's bad. Where are we going to get the money? Oh, maybe we can draw it from the CBR, or maybe we can, just tax the PFD more to cover it. No one has yet stumbled on the out year, as far as I can tell. No one's yet stumbled on the out year effects. No one has yet stumbled on where this bill takes us. And it is a bill that is intended to be permanent. It's intended to direct spending, create a formula that directs spending to education permanently. So no one has stumbled, to the extent I've seen, no one has yet stumbled on what the heck is going on once we get through this year. And that may be from the proponents, that may be by design. It may be, it's just $330 million this year. Don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. We can handle it out of the CBR, or we can handle it out of additional PFD cuts. Focusing on this year, because that's the last year they can say that. That's the only year they can say that. Once we get into FY27, you blow out the entire PFD. You blow out the entire CBR. It's all gone. And by the time you get to FY35, this state is just one giant education appropriation with a little bit of other stuff tagged on.
That would mean that the education budget was $2.3 billion.
Well, and that's not applying inflation to the other part of the education budget. That's just
right. Any one-time funding, which if you think the one-time funding is going away, because you don't think that's going to happen, right? I mean, this is what they wanted, was to get the BSA up there, but you don't think that they won't be fighting for one-time funding on top of that.
Yeah, Michael, it's just, nobody, even conservatives, Delana Johnson, the supposed education experts in the House minority, the people in the Senate minority, with no disrespect intended, but the people in the Senate minority, nobody is talking about the out year consequences of what this bill does. It's all focused on battling over the FY26 appropriation. And I think in doing that, we're being sucked in to the game plan where, let's just talk about FY36 and let's pass it because it's not that bad a deal. And then FY27 is going to be Gary Stevens again. Oh my God. You mean we passed this? Well, I guess we got to deal with it. I guess because we just passed it, I guess we got to deal with it. It's the out year effects. People are not thinking through, or they are and intentionally not discussing the out year effects of the bill. You were talking about Sean Dugan's piece. There's a similar one from in the Alaska Beacon a few days ago. Looked like Sean was trying to play catch up with his piece. But all of those pieces are talking about the 1 year effects. They're talking about what the effect would be this year. They're not talking through the budgetary effects over the long term. It'll be interesting to see if somebody asks Ledge Finance, or if somebody puts up the calculation along the way of what those long-term effects are. But the fiscal note makes them absolutely clear about where we're going.
$1 billion in 10 years. Now, this doesn't include the defined benefits. It doesn't include anything that they may or may not do with oil and gas. It includes no other spending whatsoever. Just the education bill will consume all of the PFD in the next 24 months.
Yep.
And it makes us look like geniuses, Brad. We've been projecting for the last 2 years that it would be 3 to 4 years before the PFD would be gone. And now, if this gets passed, it will be the next 24 months. It will be totally gone.
Yeah. And Michael, most everybody recognizes that you can't set in motion new revenue approaches, revenue alternatives, on the flip of a dime or on the click of a button. It takes time to get them in place. And so I can sort of see this game plan coming together. What we're going to hit is a situation in which next year people say, or this year or later this year, when they start recognizing what's going on, they'll say, oh yeah, we need to do that. We need to do that permanent fund reform that consolidates the earnings reserve and the corpus together. We need to get on that, and we need to go ahead and just sort of, play like we're doing it, find ways to play like we're doing it. And that's what we're going to need to, we need to do that. And they'll argue that's for a separate reason, but then what we're going to find is it's for the real reason of starting to pull down the corpus of the permanent fund to support spending.
And the worst part of this whole thing is that nobody's talking about the latest NEAP scores, where we fell even further. We fell out of the states. We were at 48th and 49th out of the 50 states plus the territories. Now we're 51st out of 53. We're falling, spending more money than ever, and we're falling, and they want to spend more. It's absolute madness. All right, Brad Keithley is our guest. That's number one. Ooh, if that wasn't a shock to the system, I don't know what is. We got number 2 coming up for the weekly top 3. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return with more Brad Keithley right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budget. I mean, Brad, it's been so predictable. We knew it was coming. We've been talking about it. We've been touting, we've been blowing the horn and warning the bell and saying the bridge is out, and nobody is just, okay, all right, it's fine. And then Gary's like, oh, what's that? Is that bridge out there? Oh man, maybe we should slow down a little bit. No, you're right. They're going to use this as an excuse to go right after the corpus of the permanent fund, because we need that. We can't have taxes now. And they'll drain the CBR. I mean, they'll drain the corpus of the fund. I mean, and of course they don't want to get into the CBR, because then the minority might have a voice on something if they get into the CBR. And so here we are. I mean, here $1 billion, and we still haven't seen the updated fiscal note on the defined benefits, and that's still in the pipeline somewhere. $1 billion.
We may never see an updated fiscal note on defined benefits.
I know. That's the insanity here, the nuttiness that's going on. I just don't. I don't know how people can. I don't know how people can miss it. I really don't. I just don't know how people can see this and go, "This is okay. This is totally fine."
Well, Michael, but they are. I mean, even the Sean Dugan article misses it. The Sean Dugan article focuses on the 1-year number. He doesn't get anybody. And Sean's a decent reporter, I assume.
Sean McGuire, not Dugan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Sean McGuire.
Sean's a decent reporter, and I assume that he talked to enough people that at least somebody, if somebody was thinking about it, somebody would have said, whoa, you think this is bad? Look at the 10th year. What happens in the 10th year? And nobody said that. At least he doesn't quote him in the article.
Right.
We're all so focused on trying to get through this next year and, responding to the crisis of the moment, that we're losing focus on where this all is taking us. And it's not, you don't even hear, all you hear from legislators is, yeah, we're going to have to give something. Everybody's in favor of something for some increased spending for K through 12. For education, but nobody is talking about the revenue side. Nobody's talking about how they're going to pay for it. So even the conservatives, even the so-called conservatives, by omission are leaving it to PFD cuts, leaving it to deeper and deeper PFD cuts. But as the play out of HB 69 shows, even next year we're over that limit. We blow through that limit. So we've barely got current thinkers in the legislature, I guess. We don't have forward thinkers in the legislature. And the governor hasn't talked about it. I mean, he's talked about education. He's talked about increased education spending. He's talked about his $200 million that he wants to increase education spending by. And he's not talking about how the hell he's going to pay for it.
Well, but I will say at least that is a one-time funding. It's not in perpetuity. I mean, again, looking at your magic chart here, I just want to throw that out there. Wrong one. Let me get the right number. Looking at this chart again here, as you look at the increase. Why will you not go? There we go. I mean, it's $50 million plus 1 million every year, essentially, and it goes up because it's based on the total amount. So 51, 55, 56, it'll be 58 the next year. It's 59 or 60 the following year. It's 62 the next year, every year going up. And we already had a baked in escalator of $150 million a year. Now you're just going to see, that means in 20 years, it'll be close to $1.8 billion based on that math, right? I mean,
in 20 years, the U.S. will want to give us back to Russia. I mean, this is in such sad shape.
This is nutty. I mean, how do you continue to pay for it? I know everybody wants a fish in every pot, but I mean, how do you pay for it and keep people here? This is nutty. It is absolutely nuttier than squirrel poo. I do not understand what's going on. And you're right. These minority legislators, they need to start shaking this fiscal note and saying, what are we doing? What are we doing? All right, we got to go. Here we go. 5 seconds. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I'm just shaking my head. I am shaking my head that they just like, well, okay, how did we get here, man?
We got here incrementally. We got here thinking year to year to year to year with very few people thinking about the long term.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Number 2 of the weekly top 3. Well, the legislature may have bowed out. It looks like it's up to the RCA to protect Alaskans, which doesn't give me a tremendous amount of confidence based on their past record. But Brad, the RCA.
Well, let's focus on the legislature first. There was some interesting developments this past week in the legislature about Cook Inlet Energy, and they get summed up well in maybe it's Sean. No, yeah, it is a Sean McGuire article from yesterday on the Cook Inlet. The headline is Governor Dunleavy points to temporary and painful measures to address Cook Inlet gas crunch as legislators say their role may be limited. After a year in which, legislators couldn't talk about the solutions that they were going to have for the Cook Inlet enough. We're going to reduce the royalty. That was going to lead to a Cook Inlet, an explosion in Cook Inlet development. We're going to have, phase 1 of the North Slope pipeline of the AK LNG project come down. That's going to solve it. After a year of delay, frankly, and facing reality, while the legislators went through all of these fantasy solutions, they're finally facing up to the fact that they can't that they really can't do anything about it. Here's the quote from Sean's article. Alaska legislators have broadly said energy reforms are a top priority this year, but they say the legislature's role could be limited in addressing a looming shortfall of Cook Inlet gas. Anchorage Republican Senator Kathy Giessel, they still call her a Republican. Anyway, Anchorage Republican Senator Kathy Giessel, chair of the Senate Resources Committee, suggested critical decisions such as importing gas should largely be left to the utilities and the private sector. It's a business case. I don't think the legislature should insert themselves. We're just going to gum it up. You've already gummed it up. You've already gummed it up with the year delay messing around with, fantasy solutions like Cook Inlet royalty relief and phase 1 of the AK LNG project. Thank you for finally backing out of it. Thank you for finally recognizing the reality, economic reality, but you've already gummed it up by that year delay. And now we're a year closer to the shortfall. We're a year farther down the road. And we've got NSTAR off in some other world talking about, lining themselves up with a small capitalized, inexperienced player to bring in LNG supplies on land that they don't own. Neither one of them owns, at a new LNG facility to be built in the Cook Inlet. We've got a mess, but at least it's good news that the legislature is backing out of it, because the legislature can only make this worse, like they did last year, like they did, delaying the reality of it by a year, by talking about all these grand solutions that they were going to come up with. At least if the legislature is finally recognizing that they can't do anything about it, at least that's a good thing. But here's the deal. The RCA, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, now needs to step in and do its job. What we've got are monopolists, NSTAR, Chugach, monopoly utilities that are granted certificates, don't have competition, protected against competition. What we've got now are them making unfettered decisions. John Sims likes to focus on the statute that says it's the utilities decision to make all of these choices about supply. And they have an obligation for adequate service. They have an obligation for reasonable cost. It's utilities decision. Well, that's only half the truth. The other half of the truth is the RCA has a regulatory responsibility created because the utilities have a monopoly position. The RCA is there to protect Alaskans against utilities screwing up, and have statutory authorities to be able to step in when the utilities are in the process of screwing up, because there's no fallback if the utilities screw up. They're monopolies. The RCA has statutory authorities to be able to step in and correct the utilities, or at least understand what the utilities are doing. The RCA hasn't done that yet. The hearing, Roger Marks wrote a piece in an op-ed in the ADN that Michael, you sent to me this morning, is a good one to read. Last 2 weeks ago, NSTAR did a presentation, mid-January. NSTAR did a presentation in front of the RCA talking about what it's doing. The RCA's response was, well, we think you're late. We don't think this is going to solve it. Well, if the RCA thinks it's not going to solve it, it's the RCA's responsibility to step in and do something that does solve it. It's not that you can just say, utilities, well, you did a bad job. Too bad on you. Yeah.
Right. You don't just slap their hand. You actually do something and say, well, since you're not doing it, here's what you're going to do.
And instead of the legislature, screwing around with what it screwed around last year, and at least starting this year, screwing around again before it finally wakes up. Instead of that, the RCA actually can do something about it by directing the utility, and actually should do something about it. NSTAR's made a proposal that makes no sense. NSTAR's made a proposal to build a brand new LNG facility that's tied to someone who's doing the AK LNG project, or purportedly doing the AK LNG project, on land that neither of them own, with a proposal by an operator who has no experience doing projects of this type, and is underfunded in doing the projects that it's bitten off. Right next to the land where this facility is located, where this proposed facility is to be located, is an existing LNG plant that's already certificated by the FERC to import gas. It's the old export facility, but when Marathon bought it from Phillips, they recertificated it to import gas, because at the time Marathon was concerned, or probably still is, concerned about Hillcorp running out of gas, or Hillcorp costing or charging so much that it was more economic to bring in LNG. Marathon got that facility recertificated to import gas. It's only certificated at the moment to import gas for Marathon, but it's no big step to expand that certification to include importation for Marathon and others. The big analysis of whether it should be used for importation has already gone by. It's already been certificated, already been approved for that purpose. So we've got Instar out there running around saying, "Oh, we're going to build a new facility, maybe with a guy with a company who's not had any experience doing this, with a company that's undercapitalized, and with a company that has a clear conflict of interest that we talked about last week in focusing on the AKLNG project, the big project, at the same time as they're supposed to be focusing on this project with Instar." We have Instar going down that track while we've got this existing LNG facility sitting right there on the ground, built right there next door. And we don't know, we have no clue where Chugach and MEA are, who have expiration dates on their Hillcorp contracts sooner than Instar's, presumably are going to run into this situation sooner than Instar, have been talking about imported LNG, but we have no clue about what they're doing because they haven't even made a presentation to the RCA. They haven't even come up with a proposal about how they're going to go forward on this. So I'm thankful the legislature is backing out, because all they've done is delayed focusing on the real issue, and all they've done is to use Senator Giesel's words, gum up the works. I'm thankful the legislature is backing out. They needed to before they even got in last year. But now we need the RCA to step up. Now we need the Regulatory Commission of Alaska appointed, whose members are appointed by the governor. You want to point at somebody and say it's your responsibility, whose members are appointed by the governor. It's up to the RCA to step up and take hold of the responsibilities the statute gives them to protect Alaska consumers.
And that's been our big question this whole time, is why isn't we thought, when they had that meeting and Hicks, everybody was, slapping them down. But the problem is they're offering no other solution. They are the governing body. They're the ones that can direct. And I will say, again, credit where credit's due. Kathy Giesel, I guess even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Kathy Giesel saying that this is not the legislative's purview was shocking, but surprising. A welcome surprise, I guess I should say. Again, too little, too late. They spent all of last session dithering about what they were going to do about the gas issue and the whole election season. And then coming into the beginning of this session, what were we going to do about it? And then they finally decided we're not going to do anything because it's not our place. Well, thank God somebody finally figured it out. And John Sims can't apparently keep kicking the can down the road, hoping that somebody else will pick up the bill.
That may be part of Sims's strategy. Doing this deal with Glenfarne may be part of his strategy to hopefully jerk the legislature in. Hopefully say, oh, yeah, that didn't work out. So what are we going to do now? Somebody bail us out. It is a proposal designed to fail. It's not a proposal designed to succeed. So maybe he's thinking that he's going to pull the legislature in yet. Hopefully he will wake up to the reality also that the legislature is not going to be a cavalry coming over the hill, because frankly, they don't have any guns. They don't have any way of fixing it coming over the hill. So hopefully he's going to wake up to that. And hopefully the RCA is going to wake up to the fact that Instar really doesn't know what it's doing, and we don't even know what Chugach and MEA are doing.
Well, before we go here, we only got about 2 minutes here, but why paint me a picture as an oil and gas guy, former oil and gas guy. You were in the business for years. You're intimately familiar with all that stuff. When you look at this, why would Instar propose standing up a whole new plant on a patch of land they don't even own in this potential, when there's one, like you said, right there where probably, 80% of the work has already been done. A lot of the heavy lifting has already been done. It only requires a monetary investment and recertification. Why would that, just guess here. Why would that happen?
Could be that Marathon's asking too high a price. The facility's owned by Marathon. They have the title to it. They are the ones that hold the permits. And it could be that Marathon's asking too high a price. But that's a question the RCA ought to be asking. The question that the RCA ought to be asking: why are you not pursuing something with Marathon? Why did you give up on the floating LNG project that you'd talked about, and we approved $50 million in spending for on pipelines? Why did you give up on that? Go through in detail what your analysis is. The other thing is that, Sims may be hoping that ultimately the legislature pays for the imported LNG plant. And he knows, his parent company knows, if they do the deal with NSTAR, they're going to have to pay, or do the deal with Marathon, they're going to have to pay for it. So maybe they're still hoping that the legislature comes in and pays for
with what money?
LNG facility.
With what money? I mean, again, with what money? Oh man, this is yeah. I'm with you, Brad. Today's show is a little depressing. I'm sorry. I apologize. This is just how it is. We got stuff to do. All right. We're going to continue. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Come on, guys. Stick with me. Stick with me. Don't grow weary in well-doing. Number 3 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budget. I mean, I'm just trying to pick this out. HEA, Homer Electric Association, their contract ends next month. And the president of HEA was in front of the RCA board when that big meeting went down, and Hicks and everybody was slapping everybody on the wrist. And they were asking him, don't you lose? He goes, no, I don't lose any sleep over that. And I'm like, it's 2 months away and you're not losing any sleep. How much do you get paid again? Maybe I should take that job and do it part-time and figure. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, there really is a big, there is a reckoning coming, and everybody's just walking around. Maybe they're just waiting to point the fingers at each other. I don't even know.
Well, in a state that doesn't have gas, or so HEA is defensible in this, or explainable. How about this? Probably not defensible. Explainable in the sense that they're the tail way out, or they're way out on the tail of the dog. And they've got an interruptible contract, as Nat Hertz has pointed out, an interruptible contract with NSTAR for additional supplies for a longer term. But they're still the tail. They're still a fairly small player in the tail out on the dog out on the end of the tail of the dog. And they're saying, look, this is going to get solved somehow, and we'll be part of the solution. So we can't do anything alone. We can't go in. We don't have enough money to go in and buy an LNG plant and set up an LNG import facility on our own. So whatever the big dogs, NSTAR, Chugach, and MEA decide to do, we'll be part of that. Is basically how Homer is looking at this thing. But the question is, what are NSTAR, Chugach, and HEA, or not HEA, MEA doing? What are they? How are they addressing it? Particularly, I mean, NSTAR at least has come up with a plan. Not a good one, not the right one, but at least they've come up with a plan. We don't know what Chugach and MEA are doing. The last thing we heard from Chugach was a December editorial in the ADN by the chairman of the board, their chairman of the board, and the president, in which they said, we're pursuing LNG, period, full stop. But we haven't heard anything about that.
Not a word since, yeah.
About what the proposal is and about how they're going to do it since. And Sims went out of his way not to include MEA and Chugach as part of the discussion around what he's doing with Glen Farm. So we've got to, as the date comes closer, and I blame the legislature and I blame the governor for part of this, because they wasted all last year claiming that they could do something about it and saying they were going to do something about it. And so Sims said, look, legislature's going to do something about it. I don't need to worry about it. Legislature's going to do something about it. And they wasted all last year going in circles about things that they can't do, that they aren't going to do. And so, we lost a year in that process, but now the year's over and now it's on the utilities. Now Senator Giesel says it's on the utilities. What are the utilities doing? And that's the question the RCA needs to be asking and the RCA needs to be evaluating. Problem is, we've got some RCA commissioners that don't really have any utility experience, don't really have any utility background, are Republicans who think they ought to be deregulating things anyway. But you don't deregulate to a monopolist. I mean, that's why the RCA is set up, to protect consumers against the monopolist, to balance the negotiations, to balance the power between the monopolist and consumers. And the RCA has a role to play here. As much as they may not want to play it, they have a role to play here, and they need to get on with playing that role, or else we're going to waste yet another year of going in circles about people saying, well, we don't have the ball. Who has the ball? You have the ball. You have the ball.
Right. Well, I mean, Homer's is next month, but it's 2027 is right around the corner, and it's early 2027 for everybody else. So you got 18 months to get your ducks in a row and figure all this out. It's not long. It's not long at all. And unless they do something, I just don't know. I don't know, and it's a 10% increase this year. What is it next year? What is it if they don't get this done in time and there's a stopgap of a year or two while they're trying to figure it out? What's the heating and electricity costs go to then? I mean, it's crazy.
Sims has talked about on a spot basis, if this thing doesn't get solved in time, trucking LNG up through Canada to Alaska, up on the Alaska Highway, trucking LNG over the Alaska Highway into South Central. I don't have any clue what the cost of that is, but it's got to be a hell of a lot more expensive than the proposals that have been on the table so far.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. I thought the Roger Marks article was very good to kind of summate this as well. That was timely for today, so you can go look at it I'll post it up here on this just a sec. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. The weekly top 3 continues with number 3, the big 3-0. What do we got here? Well, how's that bold leadership working out for us so far, right? Because some are calling for bold leadership. I mean, you guess you could be argued that all this spending is bold leadership. I don't know, Brad. What do you say with a bold leadership that we're being asked to look for?
Well, this is people are starting to focus on the 2026 governor's race, and they're starting to position themselves. Those who are interested in running are starting to position themselves around themes that they're trying out for their campaigns. Some of them, Click Bishop is a good example, want to talk about infrastructure, rebuilding Alaska, building new things, employing Alaskans to build new things. That's sort of the theme behind the AKLNG line as well, employing Alaskans to build new things. Although, as Senator Giesel points out, less than 50% of the people employed to build the pipeline would be Alaskans and be people that were importing from the lower 48. But, build big new things, big, bold. I've got a publisher, Jeff Lanfield, who's occasionally talked about running for governor. And his big, bold new thing is building the Connect Arm Bridge. That's going to solve housing. That's going to solve, homelessness. It's going to solve all sorts of things if we build the Connect Arm Bridge, because it's going to open up the land over on the Mat-Su side of the bridge to additional development and provide a second route up to the Mat-Su and all sorts of good things. So people are positioning themselves for this run by talking about being big and bold, taking major steps, but they all cost money. And if the current debate about HB 69 is not focusing us yet on where we're headed. We'll get there at some point. We'll finally focus on it at some point. We don't have the money. The state doesn't have the money to be big and bold. The state barely has, well, doesn't even have enough money to pay its budget. I mean, legislative finance has told us in FY26, we're 200 million short of financing even a bare bones budget at FY25 service levels. We're $200 million short at a 25-75 POMV, split 25 to the PFD, 75 to government. We're $200 million short even at that. When you look at the numbers that play out over time, particularly with the HB 69, when you look at the HB 69 fiscal note, we don't have the money. We run through the entire POMV, completely eliminate, if we pass HB 69, completely eliminate the PFD next year. So when people talk about being big and bold, that may be a theme for a campaign that looks good 2 years out. But I think when we get to the time, it's going to look ridiculous, frankly, to be talking about spending additional money that the state doesn't have on big, bold new projects. I think what we need to be thinking about now, what candidates need to be thinking about, what people need to be thinking about when they're encouraging certain people to run for office is fiscal responsibility. We're going to need a governor in 2 years, looking 2 years down the road. We're going to need a governor who talks and has plans for fiscal responsibility. And that's not just talking about curbing spending like Dunleavy did in, what was that, 2008, 2018, whatever the hell year he ran in.
2018, yeah.
2018. They all run together after a while. 2018. It's not just curbing spending like Dunleavy talked about in 2018. We passed that point. We tried that in the legislative session of 2019, didn't work. And Dunleavy hasn't come back to it since. We've tried that. Didn't work. So we're going to need a governor candidates who reasonably talk about the revenue side, who reasonably talk about what's the responsible thing to do on the revenue side. And some of them may talk about wiping out the PFD, but that's only going to get you so far. If we do HB 69 or anything approaching HB 69, we're going to have wiped out the PFD by the time we get to the campaign. So we need people who are thinking about now and putting together their platforms now based upon the situation we're going to be in 2026. And that situation that we're going to be in FY26 is going to be a pretty bad one from a fiscal standpoint. Production will be ramping up, and some will claim, with production ramping up, happy days are here again. Well, it's not the way the oil tax credit works. The revenues from that, if they ever show up in way out in the future somewhere, and they can be delayed even further than way out in the future. They can disappear entirely under the way the current oil tax structure works. So we need people who are going to address the fiscal reality that we face in FY26. Talking about big, bold solutions may seem to be the right thing to talk about now. Right. May seem to be the right thing that appeals now, but you're not putting yourself 2 years out. You're not thinking through what happens in the meantime and where the state's fiscal situation is when we hit the 2026 election cycle.
What we need, if you're talking about bold, what we need is somebody with bold vision, somebody who can see beyond the next election cycle, the next legislative session, somebody who can look down the road and say, this is where we need to be. I mean, what you did with that fiscal note was not rocket science, right? You just extrapolated out the amount because they put it on the second page there, the percentage that they're multiplying it by and everything else. Anybody with a calculator and a piece of paper could figure out that this is going to cost us $1 billion in 10 years. And nobody, $1 billion a year in 10 years. And so nobody, but they're just not thinking beyond the next cycle, the next session, we need somebody with bold long-term vision. And that's something we complained about on the show for 25 years, is that nobody is thinking beyond the next budget cycle.
Yeah, and it's big, bold vision, Michael. I mean, I think when we think about big and bold, Click will want us to think about big and bold in terms of building things. Oh, we're going to build out the infrastructure. We're going to make Alaska great again by building out the infrastructure. Because Click comes from the construction trades. That's his bread and butter. That's where he wants, that's where he wants people employed. That's what he wants, where he thinks the jobs ought to be. When people think about big and bold, they think about building things. What we need is somebody who, I guess what we're saying in different ways, is we need somebody who's big and bold about thinking about how you pay for things. because we've gotten to the point, we're getting to the point in this state. We've already gotten to the point. I mean, the $200 million deficit, even at 75-25, we've gotten to the point in this state where we can't pay for everything that we've already said we want. We can't pay for it. There's not enough money to pay for even that, much less anything else. So we need someone who is to be big and bold, someone who comes in and thinks about, how are we going to pay for this stuff? And how are we going to pay for it in a way that has the lowest adverse impact on the economy and has the lowest adverse impact on Alaskans? How are we going to spread this burden in a way that makes life better off for all of us? And gives us maybe the capacity to increase a little bit, to do things that we need to do to sort of finish out Alaska. But we need somebody first and foremost who's focusing on the pay for side, as opposed to I want to spend more, and here's how I'm going to spend more, and here's why you ought to vote for me, because I'm going to spend more going in this direction.
Right. All right, Brad, 1 minute, final thoughts here on today. I know it's been tough, but give us your final word for today.
Long term. That's the word of the day. Think long term. Think about what you're doing now in the long term. Think about what you're doing now on the fiscal side in the long term. Think about what you're doing now in the Cook Inlet legislature for the long term. Get out of the way. Let the RCA do its job.
Boldness in thought and in how do we pay $1 billion appropriation and the RCA not doing their job. That's the weekly top three. And it's kind of painful to keep bringing it up, but we got to start thinking this way, because otherwise, 2 years, the PFD is gone. That's the bottom line at this point. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Hour 2 dead ahead. Back with more. I don't know, Brad. This whole thing is just, I mean, we could see it. Why is it so hard for the legislature to see what we've been talking about? I mean, why is it so hard for them to see that it can't be? I mean, I guess unless it's intentional and they want access to the big pot of money, and that's the whole plan, and it's been the plan although I don't know if I would ascribe that much forethought to them or Machiavellian kind of, planning. It just seems like it's just more at this point. They just want more.
They would explain it. So let's ask how they would explain it. They would explain it in terms of their constituents wanting more and their constituents not wanting to pay for it themselves, at least their donor class, not wanting to pay for it themselves. They want more, but they don't want to pay for it. So how do you do that? I mean, they send the legislators off to the legislature to figure that out. And the way you do that is by shifting the cost of middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. And you keep spending. But we're about to hit the point where you can't do that anymore. So what's gonna happen? And I think as we've talked about on previous shows, I think this is all just a setup to merging to the crisis where we have to merge the earnings reserve with the corpus. That's the solution to everything. And then we'll start tinkering with how much we're going to be taking through our POMV draw in order to keep funding this stuff. But they would say it's the constituents that are driving it, and I would lay some of the blame back with the so-called conservative legislators who aren't talking about it in terms of how do you pay for this additional stuff. but are talking about it just in terms of raw opposition to the proposed spending. So with HB 69, various legislators, conservatives and progressives, have said, well, we're going to end up with something. We got to increase spending to the school system in some way. Well, there's not a discussion of how are you going to pay for that. There's not a discussion of, are you ready for taxes? Is that what you want in order to pay for this additional spending? I mean, to me, the way to push back sort of has me agreeing with Americans for Prosperity in a way. The way to push back on this stuff is to say, look, you can have this stuff, but you're going to have to pay for it, and to pay for it, we're going to have taxes. And so I'm going to propose an amendment. Takes a strong conservative to do this, I suppose, but I'm going to propose an amendment that says, if you pass this bill, then we're going to have taxes, and this is how we're going to pay for it. And create opposition, create a recognition in the state that this stuff doesn't come for free, that somebody's going to have to pay for it, and this is going to be the target audience for who's going to pay for it. We don't have, to my knowledge, we don't have one revenue bill in the legislature this time. We don't have anything about oil taxes. We don't have anything about sales taxes. We don't have anything about any sort of revenue. So we're just admitting, everybody's admitting it's going to come out of the PFD. But HB 69 runs us out of that in 2 years. So it's a combination, Michael. I guess the answer is it's a combination of constituents pushing for more, legislators saying, okay, I'll give you more, constituents saying, but I don't want to pay for it, legislators saying, okay, well, I figured out a way where you don't have to pay for it. You, my donors, don't have to pay for it. And that just keeps going. And no one recognizing, no one identifying, no one educating constituents on where that takes us in the long term, on where that's going to take us in terms of who pays.
Well, and that's been part of the problem the whole time, is that nobody's been asking who pays. Donna just sent me a text that said, Ledge Finance laid out the numbers for HB 69 at the House Education Committee. Brad may have missed it. But did they respond? I mean, did they look at it and go, well, this is $1 billion. This is going to be problematic. If we can't pay for it today, how are we going to pay for it tomorrow? How are we going to pay for it next year? If we're already 200 million upside down at this point, how do we pay for it when it's $1 billion a year, or 800 or 700 or 600 million dollars a year? Nobody's asking. Maybe that's when Gary Stevens said, wow, it's going to be so difficult. I mean, maybe that I just don't know. But this should not be a shock or a surprise to anybody that's been paying attention.
No. And the House Education Committee was yesterday, so it got laid out yesterday. But Sean didn't include it in his article. Today. Which
again is still, I mean, congrats to Sean McGuire for finally, welcome to the party, pal, talking about the who pays function of it and what the costs are. Although he doesn't really bring up who pays. No. He just talks about the costs of it, but it's not even the true costs, which is, again, how are people supposed to make decision if they don't have, and this goes back to my whole problem and heartburn with some of the journalists in this state, is that they're not talking about these things. We're talking about it on the show, and nobody else really seems to be bringing up the ultimate cost of these things in the long run, which is frustrating for sure.
Yeah, I would encourage, to the extent that members of the House minority or the Senate minority are listening to the show, I would encourage you to talk about it at your briefings. I would encourage you to talk about the long-term costs of these things and running through the PFD and where the hell is this taking us? Because that's the only thing that the journalists are responding to. The journalists are responding to what the legislators talk about. They're not responding, or the special interests, the industry. They're not responding to anything else. They're not doing any thinking on their own. They're just responding to what people are saying down in Juneau. So I would encourage, to the extent there are minority members, either House or Senate, listening to the show, I would encourage you to talk about that.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're out of time. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Welcome back to the program. It is hour 2. It's Tuesday, and that means we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. If you missed it, wow, you missed a good one, my friends. I mean, good in the sense of it was chock full of information. Bad because it is severely depressing to take a look at this. I want to come back to what we were talking a little bit about yesterday and tie it in with what was to what Brad was talking about today. This new bill for education, HB 69, is the PFD killer. It is the one bill that has the ability to basically decimate what's left of the PFD, and it's problematic, and nobody is really talking about it. Donna said that they put all this in front of the legislature yesterday during the House Education Committee, but there's been no reporting on it, no articles, no talking about it. The cost of this bill, and I know everybody wants education. We want education to be fully funded. I mean, nobody's talking about the scholastic achievement that we've had and where we're at right now with the latest report card scores, the NEEP scores. Nobody's talking about how in 2015, when we were paying more per student than any other state in the nation, and we were still at the bottom of the heap scholastically in achievement. This goes all the way back to when Sarah Palin was governor, and they were struggling with a 76% graduation rate. 74% graduation rate. And they've ratcheted that up all the way to a 76 or 77% graduation rate at this point. It is madness what's going on with our schools and the costs and everything else driving this stuff. It is unsustainable, I think, is the word that we're looking for right now. And what they're proposing right now is not going to help us in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, it will accelerate the problems that we have. Now, maybe, as Brad says, the whole point is to get us to start considering this mad plan of combining the earnings reserve with the corpus of the fund. Now, I've said for years that was the ultimate goal of the POMV model. I said it back when they first proposed it back in 1999, that was the purpose. The purpose was to be able to get access to the corpus of the fund, because that's where, that's the big money. That's the big money, 75 billion, 80 billion, wherever it's sitting today, $75 billion. That's the big money right there that they just would love to get their hands on, but they can't access it because of the Constitution. And yet you could see this is all leading up to the point to where they're going to say, well, do you want taxes or do you want us to touch the permanent fund? And people in this state are so tax adverse. And I'm not a fan of taxes. Don't get me wrong. They're so tax averse that they will do anything to avoid the dreaded T word. They will do anything, not really analyzing it and not thinking about not analyzing or thinking about what funds government right now. What's funding government is, of course, taxes, oil, royalties, revenues, all that stuff that comes in, and the POMV. The POMV makes up a significant portion of that state budget. Now, we don't want taxes. Okay. No tax. The problem is that if you allow them to have access to the corpus of the fund, you are inevitably voting for taxes, because what will happen is that they'll eat into the seed corn. They'll eat into because that's what it is, right? It's the seed corn. Every year they plant it, they reap the crop every year. I mean, whatever analogy you want to use, that's what they're going to do. They're going to eat the seed corn, and it'll be, maybe the first, it'll be, $500 million a year or something more than what they did. But eventually you'll start eating into the earning potential of the fund, and you won't be getting the returns that you were getting. But government will continue to grow. I mean, in 10 years, HB 69 will be costing us an additional $1 billion a year. That's not a one-time deal. Every year moving forward. Now, if we're 200 million upside down this year, and they want to put the 400 million on for the first tranche, and then another 180 million on for the next 2 years, and then $55 to $60 million every year thereafter as they continue to go up because it's locked and pegged to inflation. That's just one spending bill. That's not defined benefits. That's not wildfire protection. That's not any other component of government. That is one bill only for education. Oh, and they also want you to shut up and sit down and stop talking about the achievement scores. They want to stop talking about accountability. Stop talking about policy changes and what we're doing with the kids. Just give us the money and we'll do it. Anthony in the chat room just said, I think people in Alaska are phobic of taxes because looking at government spending historically, we can't trust that once the doors open, that we don't wind up hemorrhaging buckets of money with unchecked and wild state spending. And I agree. That's probably the genesis of where this phobia on taxes comes from. But the answer to that is not to give them access to it's not unlimited, but to this gigantic pot of money and say, here, control yourself. That's like dropping an alcoholic into a distillery and saying, go, don't do it. Don't, you just, you don't give them access to a huge pot of money and say, as long as you don't tax us, you could spend all this. Because what's going to happen? Well, we know they're going to spend it all. Because his past performance is indicative of future results. We know that's what they're doing now. They're spending it all and then some. I mean, if we're serious about fixing education and the education problems, we have to admit that, one, there's something fundamentally broken in the way we're educating our kids. There's something is not quite right. Something is not working as intended. Because this is not a 1-year problem. This is not a 5-year problem. This is a 10 and 15-year problem. Where we started seeing these scores go down, more than 15 years, 20 years almost. Because we were having these same problems during the end of the Murkowski and into the Palin administration. Same problems. And so the answer of just put more money is not it's not fixing the problem. We'll just have a more expensive problem if we just keep throwing money at it. And putting money in the BSA makes no sense whatsoever, other than it appeases the school unions and the administrators and the people who have to make budgets and have to make those hard decisions, because it gives them some form of surety that they know that their budget, it's going to be at such and such a level. But it doesn't do anything else. The BSA is not the mechanism, because one, you lock it in and it takes it right out of you can't have any more conversations about it, with expending a tremendous amount of political capital to make any changes, especially downward changes. Upward changes probably a lot easier, but downward changes definitely not easier. So you put us on the hook in perpetuity for whatever you're putting. Why not create efficiencies? I mean, we've talked about combining the school district's healthcare plans onto a single plan, combining them with the state's plan. Why don't we do that? That was estimated to save, if I remember correctly, and if there's a legislator or a staffer in the chat room who wants to correct me, I believe that it was upwards of $55 million that they were going to save by simply combining the healthcare plans for all the 53 separate districts. We've talked about consolidating the districts down to where you don't have duplication of effort 53 times for some districts where they only have a couple dozen kids. Having one-time funding, one year-to-year funding, is not that big a deal. They make it a big deal, and as I said, it becomes political theater when the unions get involved and demand that all their people must have a pink slip notice if the budget's not completely funded or if there's a problem, so that they can gen up the response from the public, who are not really up on how this whole thing works. I'm not saying that the public's stupid. They're just not paying attention. They don't understand the budget process. They don't understand the budget timeline. They don't understand how all those things work. And all they see is photographs in the newspaper or on the evening news of all these people standing in an assembly chamber or at a meeting, all in red shirts or purple shirts or whatever, the same color shirts, waving their pink cards saying, "We're going to get fired and your children are going to be dumb because we're not going to be there to teach them." Well, I'll take it back, because it's not all people, because there's a ton of parents right now who, again, I guess thankfully for COVID, one of the few silver linings in that whole mess was the fact that people figured out that this school thing is a bit of a racket. And they pulled their kids out. 17% now of students in the state are being correspondence, homeschooled, whatever. It's 17%. So somebody at least is paying attention there. But the rest of the people, I mean, they're busy. They got their lives. They got their jobs. They got soccer practice. They got, the Sunday poker night. They got whatever's going on in their life. And so they're not really up on how all this stuff works. And they see the thing in the paper and they go, "Oh, well, we must need to do that." And there's no connection between what their government's doing and what that's actually costing them. It's all stealthily going on behind the scenes, so they don't know. So they're like, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that." And then we see all this stuff on social medias and stuff when they start talking about closing schools, and everybody gets all emotional, but nobody's asking the question. And that's rhetorical, because there actually are some people who because I've read through some of these comment threads when the school is going to close or whatever, and people go, "Well, I just don't know." I mean, this was the thing yesterday, right? The Facebook post from yesterday where the son was like, "They're going to close some schools. You need to go talk to principals. Got pink slips. You need to go talk to them." Well, great. Yes, it's possible. How many of the people, here's an interesting thing. This would be an interesting stat to pull up. I don't know how I would do it. I don't know if I have time to do it. Maybe somebody go look at how many teachers receive pink slips every year, and then look at actually how many of them are laid off. Because if I recall correctly, there was a number. Well, it should have been. It's hot. Time flies. It was 15 years ago that I was on the borough assembly. 11 years ago that I was on the borough assembly in Fairbanks. But I remember somebody actually bringing that up at one point, and somebody mentioning a number. But the statistics are excruciatingly low for everybody that gets a pink slip. I mean, it's like single digits. Only actually 3 or 4% are actually laid off. So they give everybody a pink slip so that everybody can run around with their hair on fire, telling their neighbors and telling the people and waving in front of the cameras and saying, I'm going to be fired. And the bottom line is it's, 1 or 2 or the lowest people on the totem pole that get laid off. If anybody gets laid off, usually what they do is they just don't rehire for positions where people have left or people retire. That was the big bombshell quote in the paper yesterday when the Anchorage was talking about, we've got to lay off 200 teachers. And then we've got 60 more teachers because of the decline in enrollment. Wait a minute. Is it 60 because of decline, or is it 260? And nobody's losing their job. With 260, the next paragraph said, nobody's losing their job. They just won't rehire when people retire or people leave. Somebody's got to pay for all this, folks. And $1 billion a year more than where we're at right now is not the answer. At $1 billion a year, we will be the top contributor. We will be the highest paying per student average in the nation. At that point, we're like 5 or 6 right now. We were number 1 in 2015 and still had crappy scholastic scores. Now we're even worse, 51 out of 53. I mean, I don't know how to get the attention of the average Joe out there to pay attention to this. I do not. I don't know how. But PFD is gone in 2 years, if not sooner. This may be our last PFD. If they include defined benefits or any other kind of spending, 98% of the POMV draw. Just the school budget. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right. I needed to calm down for a second. And now they've got a working group. Top talks will begin with wide divisions between the Republican governor and the democratically led bipartisan majority legislative caucuses in both the House and the Senate. A House majority bill is seeking to boost per student spending by more than 20% next year and 40% in 3 years. So now it's going to be representatives from the House majority, the Senate majority, the House minority, the Senate minority, plus Dunleavy Legislative Director Jordan Schilling. It's a group. It's one lead member from each. So you've got a 5-member working group that's going to go over and try and hammer out all of these. I'm curious, who is does it say here? A secondary state majority participant in the group will be Loki Tobin. Oh, bear. Shelley Hughes is going to be the Senate minority. The lead Senate minority. So they have an alternate. So they have the lead and the alternate. Mike Cronk is going to be the lead. Shelley Hughes is going to be the secondary one. The House majority is going to be Rebecca Himshoot, who is the author of the $1 billion bill. The primary House minority member is going to be Delana Johnson, with the secondary member being Justin Ruffridge. Oh, I don't have a lot of faith in that. I don't have a lot of faith in this, especially on the House side. I mean, I just don't. Delana Johnson has not, in my mind, stood out as a huge fiscal conservative over the last few years. She's a nice lady. I like her a lot, but just not stood up. And Justin Ruffridge, when asked about it on the program last time he was on, said that he favored some kind of increase in education funding. I can't remember what his answer was on the accountability function, but maybe we'll have to get Justin back in to talk about it. But we're going to see where this goes. The meetings are expected to start today. And they're going to be limited meetings. It says, according to Senate President Gary Stevens, a limited number of other lawmakers and staff, such as Ledge Finance Division experts, will also be present at the meetings expected to start Tuesday. A limited number of other. So are these private meetings? These should be public meetings, right? These meetings should be public. You're going to have discussions on all this stuff. We'll see. Stevens is quoted, "I think there's a reason to be optimistic. The governor has called us all together. He wants to find a negotiated agreement. He said very clearly, if we can work this out, I will not veto anything." Okay. Don't take away that veto pen, Big Mike. We might need it. We might need it. Oh, man. I mean, Tobin, Wilikowski and Tobin, Bryce Edgmond and Delana Johnson, Bryce Edgmond and, Rebecca Himshoot, and then Delana Johnson and Justin Ruffridge. The only two that can be counted on as, I guess, conservatives in there would be Mike Cronk and Shelley Hughes. I'm not encouraged. I'm not encouraged by this, but we're going to have to see. But again, $1 billion a year in perpetuity moving forward. I mean, it's $500 million this year, and then it just goes up from there. And we're already at 200 million upside down. We're already going to take a big 90% of the POMV draw just to pay for what we've got in the pipeline right now. Not even talking about the defined benefits.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
All right. Welcome back to the program. Hour 2 continues. I was just talking about the Peninsula Clarion. Mark Sabatini over at the Peninsula Clarion has written an article talking about how the governor has now called a working group to discuss this education funding. They want to get it done quickly. That's what they said. They want to get it done. They want to get something passed and done quickly so that the school districts, who are all in the middle of their budget cycles, can know what's going on. Can have fiscal certainty and surety that they know that they're on good. Again, all part and parcel of all part of the plan. All part of the plan. I mean, if you were doing this and had been doing it for years, wouldn't it make sense to delay your budgetary cycle until the legislature was done with their stuff so you wouldn't create all the uncertainty? I mean, if you were a municipality and you're like, well, or is it working as intended because now you can beat the drum and you can go through all the political theater and the kabuki of again, the red shirts and the pink slips and the screaming from the high heavens and everything else? Maybe it's working as intended. To me, it would make sense to delay your budgetary process until the legislature has decided what they're going to give you that year. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, this new working group, which is going to try and work through this $1 billion bill, I'm trying to wrap my brain around that. Let me pull up that. I want to pull up again. $325 million this year. $173 million, almost $174 million next year, plus an additional $144 million the following year. This is compounding. So by the time you get done, you're at about $800 million. And then you just start tacking on $50 to $60 million a year, every year, because due to that pegging it to the CPI. But by 2027, by 2027, you are already eating. The permanent fund is gone. All the money, that is 99% of the entirety of the POMV draw is consumed by that. And again, that's assuming a flat budget on everything else. I know I keep saying don't grow weary in well-doing, but sometimes I just get tired of talking about the same thing over and over. Who pays? How do we afford it? I mean, it's shocking when I, Michael Dukes, am the rational one in the room on fiscal policy. I have historically not been great with money in my own life. It wasn't until I was in my early 40s, mid 40s before I got my poop in a group. And it's shocking that I am the adult in the room saying, guys, you might not be doing something right here. I'm sorry, back to this group. So the group will include one member from each of the House and Senate, minority and majority, and Dunleavy's legislative director, Jordan Schilling. Now, in addition to the single member from each of the bodies and the minority majority, there'll be a secondary, there'll be an alternate, meaning they'll be in the meeting, but they won't really be participating but it's in case the primary has to step away, right? So who are going to be our champions on this education deal? Who's going to do it? Do you have high hopes? In the Senate, it's going to be led by Bill Wielechowski for the majority, with Senator Loki Tobin as his backup. So that's his alternate, is going to be Loki, the gal who wanted the $1,900 BSA increase. Okay. So that's the majority. On the minority side in the Senate, it's going to be Mike Cronk, former teacher. I like Mike. He's mostly a fiscal, he's done a few things that I haven't agreed with, but and then his secondary, his backup, his alternate is going to be Shelley Hughes. Okay. Shelley Hughes is pretty conservative, although she's also a pragmatist and will make deals when deals need to be made. So not as staunch not a line in the sand as sometimes I would like, but probably one of the most conservative members of the Senate. I agree. So it's not too bad. Mike Cronk, Shelley Hughes. What about in the House? Well, in the House, it's going to be Bryce Edgmond, who never saw a dollar that he didn't want to spend, for the majority, with his alternate being Rebecca Himshoot, who is the author of HB 69, the $1 billion bill. And on the minority side, please, God, who's going to be on the minority side? Who's going to stand up for us on fiscal? Who's going to stand in the gap? I mean, give me somebody who stood with the governor on vetoes and things like that. No. The House minority member the primary member will be Delana Johnson, who again is a super nice lady. I like her. She's done some good things out there, but there's been times when I just don't understand her position. She didn't support the governor's vetoes in the past. She, it was always cuts for everybody else, but don't cut my stuff. I mean, and I understand her position being in Palmer, and it was the Division of Ag, and it was a lot of, but it's just would not have been my first choice on this one. And her backup, her alternate is Justin Ruffridge from the Kenai. I like Justin. I agree with some of what he says. I don't agree with others what he says. He had said on the program the last time he was on that he's willing to take a look at increasing the BSA this much. As a private business owner, he ought to look at this and go, whoa. So we'll see. So minority members Delana Johnson and Justin Ruffridge as the alternate. Not what you would consider to be the most fiscally conservative working group ever. They start meeting today. Now, interestingly enough, I saw this quote, and I'm not sure exactly what it means. I don't know if it means that these meetings should be public meetings, but the legislature has exempted themselves before from the Open Meetings Act, so I don't know. But I read this. Senate President Gary Stevens said a limited number of lawmakers and staff, such as Leg Finance, will also be present at the meetings expected to start today. So are they limiting the people in the room? Are they going to be broadcasting them on gavel to gavel? Are they going to be private meetings? Is this I don't think that it's not a caucus meeting. It's a working group meeting. So I don't know. It's unclear here whether or not these meetings will be broadcast on gavel to gavel or what's going on. But here they are trying to figure out which direction they're going with a bill that literally is the bullet that will kill the PFD. If this bill passes, we're done. The PFD is over because there is no other way to pay for it. This literally ramps up over the course of 36 months to be $800 million, almost $800 million a year, and then just keeps ratcheting up from there. There's no finer point to put on it, folks. If they do this, the PFD is dead. Then what happens? To all of you out there who have been like, fine, take the PFD, just don't tax me. What happens in 2028? What happens in 2029? Now, it could be, as Brad said, that they'll make a move to then combine the earnings reserve and the corpus of the fund so that they can start drawing from the corpus of the fund and overdraw it. And they'll sell it as, well, do you want taxes or do you want us to do this? And some of you suckers will say, oh, yeah, just take that. Don't do the tax. Not realizing that you're dooming your grandchildren to a future of absolute misery because they're going to be taxed because they will suck all the juice out of that lemon and there won't be anything left. But what do I know? What do I know? Nothing, apparently. I mean, I've been talking about this for, 2 decades or so, but no big deal. Yep. We'll have to see. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Up next, we need him. We need our hero, Chris Story, to bring us out of the doldrums. Back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Yeah. Kim is right. Hence the out-migration. Yeah, you want to accelerate the out-migration? That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. Now, you're going to have to cut me out of here with a chainsaw because I've committed the rest of my life to the state of Alaska. But that doesn't mean it's always going to be sunshine and roses, right? I'm scrolling backwards here. Frank says, easy peasy, change your fiscal year. This is when I was talking about if I was an assembly, if I was a borough, if I was a city, and it was messing with my budgeting cycle because we were waiting on the legislature with bated breath to see how much money we got from the legislature, I would move my fiscal year. I'd bump it ahead 1 month. There you go. Problem solved. But see, I think they want the problem. I think they want it because then they could put pressure on the legislature. Yeah, Harold, cool it. I see Harold. Just cool it, Harold. You're getting your no personal attacks. All right. No personal attacks. Because you don't want me attacking you, do you? I don't want personal attacks. Harold makes me smile. He really does. Yeah. Yet, Michael, you and I supported candidates that did 180 on us when it comes to funding education. I know. You can only go on faith. You have to believe. You take your best shot and hope that it's right. And we've all been burned. How many times have we been burned, Frank? How many times? Lots of times. Melissa says Mike Kronk will be great. I hope so. I hope he remains strong. Brian says the cynic in me is thinking the fix is in. The magic ingredient in this working group are the people who have a conflict of interest. So is that what Himshoot? Himshoot definitely has a conflict of interest. Tobin's already on record as saying she wants a $1,900 PFD. I guess you could say Kronk is a former educator, but he's not anymore. So I don't know if you could say that, but definitely some interesting choices in there. I'm scrolling through here. Staying with the bullet analogy, says Brian. Round is chambered, the hammer cocked, and the executioner finger is taking up the slack. Kind of how we feel, right? That's kind of it is. Kim says, you started strong and ended strong. Yeah, I'm going to have a drink when this thing's over. I mean, that's a thing. All right, let me get Mr. Story on the line here. Let's see if we can get him squirreled away. Started strong and ended strong. Thank you.
Good day.
Good day. Hello, my friend. How are you? Are you
fantastic?
You're all good. It's all good in the hood.
Yeah. All good in the hood.
Do you live in the hood? I've seen your neighborhood. I'm feeling like maybe you're exaggerating a little bit there.
I thought you were. Yeah, you were buying crack the other day.
Yes, I was.
That's right.
I was.
I did see you. That's right.
I'm working on my teeth. I only have 2 left. It'll be fine. All right, Mr. Story. Sorry, I was thinking of you while I was talking about people who are like, take the PFD, it'll be fine. And now we've got $1 billion bill up in front of the legislature. Wonder how that's going to work.
I never said take the PFD, it'll be fine.
You said,
get me started.
You said take the PFD. I just don't tax me. Just go ahead and take the PFD. And I said, what did I say? I said, they'll take the PFD and then what will happen?
They'll tax you anyway. I never said take the PFD, but if given the choice, I felt it was a false dichotomy to begin with, but given the choice, an income tax versus taking some of the PFD. I mean, you're painting me out to be something that I'm not, Michael.
Some of the PFD? How much is some? Because they're taking over half of it now, and now they're going to take all of it. How did you think this was going to end up?
I know, of course, I have never advocated for anything. I just like to push your buttons. It's fun to watch you get riled up.
He does like to push my buttons. He does. Sometimes he says some of the weirdest stuff that it just, it's like winding me up and letting me go. All right. What are we talking about today?
Ironically, forgiveness.
Okay. I have to work on that. I do. All right. Chris Story. We're talking about forgiveness. He's now back on hold. We're going to be back to you here. I didn't get through the rest of the comments. I apologize. We'll see if we can get it. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's get to it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Only 26 of you have liked it. There's 70-something people. Do you not like me?
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right. Chris Story, the man from Homer, the sage. What did I call him in the description? I forgot. The Sage of Sanity. That's what it was. Because we need him after today's show. Holy cow, man. The Sage of Sanity, Chris Story, comes in to talk with us today. His topic today, which he needs, is forgiveness. Forgive me, my son, for I have sinned against you. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Fantastic, Michael. Just sitting here in the library thinking, how is Michael going to abuse me verbally this morning? And it's already happening.
It's already
wonderful.
It's already done there, Mister. Go ahead and take my PFD. Don't tax me. You like how I just laid that out there and didn't give you any opportunity to respond for that. Forgiveness. Forgive me, Chris, for doing that. That was unkind. What do we got? So talk to me today about forgiveness and its place in our journey to being better people.
I'm calling this actually forgiveness for goodness sake. So Dr. Joseph Murphy was a psychologist and a theologian from Ireland, and he wrote a book in 1963 called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And you'd wonder maybe, why is there a whole chapter, a whole thesis inside this book about forgiveness? What's that got to do with your subconscious mind? Well, he makes the case that if you do not forgive, you'll never gain control completely over your subconscious mind, which actually controls everything from your physiology to your psychology to your results in life and to ultimately whether or not you find happiness or meaning in life. So it's actually pretty key. And he tells a story in this whole thesis on forgiveness about a man who had moved here from France, and he had come to Dr. Murphy because he was just miserable and having physical ailments, having mental health ailments, having poor negative results in life in almost every category you can imagine. To get to talking and really get to the bottom of it. And as it turns out, this gentleman from France 15 years prior had shot his brother when he found him having an affair with his wife. And
of course it does. He's French. I mean, of course he was. Of course.
But never mind. Now, he never does explain how only 15 years later he's free and living in America with a new wife and several children and a new job. And none of that's discussed. So let's just assume that he was let off on by a jury of his peers or whatever they have for justice in France. Let's just assume that all is well and he wasn't actually a fugitive. So that said, he helped him forgive himself for shooting his brother. And suddenly his entire life began to turn around. And I thought, my goodness, if there is forgiveness there, if you can learn to forgive yourself for something as heinous as that, what about you and me with just regular things that we might be holding ourselves accountable to? So it's not just forgiving other people, although that is essential. Forgiving those that have wronged you or harmed you or dismissed your dreams or dismissed you in general, mocked you, bullied you, whatever it is that might be living there and lingering in your subconscious mind, you've got to learn to forgive them. But along with them, the quote, them outside of you, is learning to forgive yourself. It's just as important to allow yourself the grace of forgiving yourself for having said something, not said something, done or not done something in the past. You're new. Like every 11 months, we know that our cellular body is completely reproduced itself. So you are not the same person you were last year or last month, even, really, if you can allow yourself to be forgiven. Others can forgive you. You know this, and people forgive you all the time for things. Why don't you forgive yourself for things that you're holding yourself accountable? I agree with Dr. Murphy. This is I think, the key to unlock the door to whatever cell you might be living in and allow yourself to walk out into the sunshine of today. At the heart of it is forgiving yourself and others for transgressions in the past, because all that's going to do is hold you back.
I too shot my brother, but I don't feel bad about it because it was with a bottle rocket. But I mean,
I thought you shot the sheriff, but I could be wrong.
No, there's the deputy, so it's okay.
Okay.
No, but you're right. I mean, sometimes we hold the grudge against ourselves longer than everybody else has forgotten about it, and we're like, man, I'm such a bad person because I did this or that or the other thing. People are like, what are you talking about? Well, back in the day when I don't remember that. Okay. We're the ones that are dragging. We got this boat anchor that we're walking around with dragging behind us. And we're like, oh, we just can't, and we all make mistakes. The point is to learn from them. Right now, shooting your brother, that is a pretty big one. And I guess that's the big example that we needed to see, but drag it.
It's dramatic.
It is. But I mean, to drag that anchor around with you for the rest of your life makes no sense. At some point, you got to be like, okay, I learned from that, and now I can move on.
Because some people have legit wronged you. Like some people have really done you wrong, dismissed you, or treated you horribly, or cheated you out of something. And maybe you've been the person who's, in your own mind anyway, perceived your behaviors as having had that impact on somebody else. And it might be right. It might be legitimate. You really might have been a real turd in the punch bowl of life at some point, even yesterday, maybe. But you've got to forgive, not forget, but forgive, and allow yourself to move on. It's a little bit like the butterfly who struggles through to get out of the cocoon and get out into the world. It can't be holding on to things it did as a caterpillar. It can't be holding on to something that in its past. It has to look forward in order to be reborn into the sunshine of today. And of course, I don't know how they fly. Nobody understands it, but they do, and they're beautiful, and so are you.
So how do we start? So I guess this goes back again to, as it always does, it seems like on all our conversations, it begins with some kind of self-analysis, right? I mean, we've got to look at ourselves and be like, look behind you. Is there an anchor? Am I dragging? Look at the size of that thing. I mean, am I dragging it behind me? So we have to do some self-analysis first. Is that the kind of, walk me through the steps here?
Or just let go. It's like I got into a debate last week with somebody who I knew before I got into the debate. I knew which direction it was going to go. And maybe that knowledge influenced how it went. I don't know. I can't be certain. But I had predicted, or I guess there were predictable results. And I sort of over the weekend beat myself about the head thinking, A, why did you enter that debate? You knew where it was going to go. Why did you even do it? And there was all this wrestling with self-loathing of like, just let go of the stick. Let go of your end of the stick. This is ridiculous. You should never even talk to this person about this because you knew where they were coming from. Yeah, I know they're the duly elected person that's in power. Doesn't matter. You knew where this person was coming from, Chris. You entered the debate against your own better advice, which wasn't just to seek to understand. I wanted her to understand where I was coming from, so much so that I didn't feel good after the conversation. So I wrestled with that over the weekend, and I didn't need to do a whole lot of self-analysis. You know what I needed to do? Just let go. Just so you don't forget it. It was yesterday. It was last week. Move on. Nothing was said, horrible. It was just, I just went there with this insistence that they understand where I was coming from. I violated my own principles of seek to understand, then be understood. And so fine, today's a new day. I begin this week anew and I let go. So sometimes it's just that easy. Yeah. If something's burning at you, you know what it is. Let go.
But I think that there's a key point there. You can't just be like, it was yesterday, I let it go. You have to learn from it as well, though, right? You have to take something away. You can't just be like, no, okay, I forgive myself for being a jerk, and or from being too strident, or for yelling at somebody. I forgive myself. It's got to be like, I will do better. Now I can, I mean, right? I mean, you have to have, there has to be some kind of learning component in there. Otherwise, you're just perpetuating the same behavior over and over and over again.
And I think to a certain extent, yes, I agree with you. And I think to that extent that it's bothering you or nagging at you, you already know. You know that this was something, an affront or something you would do differently next time. And it's okay to acknowledge that and say, okay, I'll do something different when next confronted with this issue. So I'm going to let go of how I handled it before. So I think we're both saying the same thing.
Right.
It's a matter of letting go. Yes, you acknowledge it because that's why you're feeling bad.
Yeah.
You're feeling sort of that guilt, or it's holding you back simply because you feel it and you know you could have and should have done something or behaved differently or said something differently or stood up for somebody that you didn't.
You create a plan for the next time it happens, right? Okay, so next time I do this, I'm going to do A, B, and C instead of the other thing that I did. And now I can let it go. I mean, to me anyway, that's as I look at it, that makes the logical sense. Otherwise, I'm just always forgiving myself for being a dillweed and
we do too, Michael.
Yeah, I know.
We forgive you for that same thing.
Thank you for your forgiveness on that. But yeah, it is important because that guilt is really, guilt and shame and those kind of things. People carry that stuff with them for a long time. Oh man, and it wears at you, and it really drags you down. And I have met people who over the years, who I've known for years, and then years later they'd be like, this one time when and I'm like, you've been carrying that around for years, and it's astonishing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It physiologically, I mean, there's so many cases of people's, bodies reacting to this, that our body is going to react to the guilt or whatever's associated with this issue that's happened in the past that we haven't either forgiven somebody else or ourselves. And so I think it's powerful. It just hit me like a ton of bricks this morning when I was reading from Dr. Joseph Murphy. And I'm like, you know what? He's the Irish. You've got a lot of things right, and that's one of them.
Yeah, that and whiskey. Those are the two things that got it. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you, my friend. As always, it's great to talk with you. Appreciate you coming on board today.
My pleasure.
You can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. That's where he's got all of his writings and his podcasts and everything else. Go check it out. We're out of time for today. Tomorrow, hoping to talk to a legislator an hour or two. On Thursday, we're going to talk food sustainability and the Compass Group. It's all coming up. Be kind, love one another, live well. Okay. That does it for me today. Appreciate you guys coming on board. Like I said, working on some legislators for tomorrow. Be nice to talk to, maybe we can talk to Justin Ruffridge, and I'll reach out to him and see if we can get him to talk about this working group and what his thoughts are on it. But we'll see. We'll see what we can come up with. On Thursday, again, we're going to be talking about food security and a group that's like the Boys and Girls Club, only it's all privately funded, and what they're doing in the community. So that's it for me, my friends. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. We'll see you tomorrow.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.